Well, yeah.
No, like, seriously, no rush to a meeting.
Oh, so here's the thing. I need to find a chapter, a local chapter of being off by half an hour on every meeting. Because for the last 2 weeks, I don't know if it's a calendar issue, it's my internal brain, but I've literally been like a half an hour behind on every meeting. And Earl's in my office, we're going over ordinance, and I mean, it's like, they're getting ready to start, and I'm like, it's at 9:30.
I put a meeting on my calendar, I put some meetings on my calendar when I'm in Nashville. For that, Nashville's an hour behind, so for
Yeah.
whatever reason, my settings have populated an hour differently.
Oh,
So I get, I get my phone was fine, but on my laptop, my computer. It was
Yeah.
all an hour, so I missed it.
right.
Whoops.
So we've got,
Let's get started, so welcome to the December 18th meeting of the Ordinance Review Committee. I'm Dan DeMerit, I am chairing for Rob Larway. And we have a new member, Councilor Hardison, on the committee. And EJ's new with us too, right? So it's not so we are working, this committee is working through a methodical review, staff-led largely, review of our ordinances to refresh them, to accommodate or align with changes to state statute, changes to procedure, how things happen. We want to really get away from that, and we're going to do it over a 5-year span, and then from then forth do it regularly. So we have less and less conversations about our ordinances don't match with our operations. And we really appreciate, it's very much staff-led, and really appreciate what the staff's done to give us a framework and then bring ideas forward, which involves coordinating across the entire, all the departments. So it's very helpful. Thank you.
yeah,
Shelley?
yes, okay, so we are getting ready to launch a new calendar year, just in case you didn't know. And as of
12:30 a.m.
Yeah, that's right.
Everyone.
So as part of that process, I went back into the ordinance review chart because at the last meeting that we had, Dan, your committee had suggested or recommended that we take another look at that and keep it as a living document that we continuously update and we share out. So I keep it on my radar, and of course I update it, but I haven't necessarily been, as I update, sharing it out. So what you have today in front of you is the most recent update. I finished updating it this morning, but I already have got changes from this morning's meetings. So I guess the thing that I really want to say about these Orono ordinances is, as Dan said, we are looking at having a complete review of the ordinance manual within a 4 to a 5 year stretch, in ranking priorities according to what the work plans are, what the department needs are, and the council reserves the right to change priority or to basically go in and shuffle things as their needs and their work plan changes. And so on the right side of this schedule, you will see that there are different notes, and there have been, we originally had every schedule or every ordinance set to when we were going to take it up. But as the needs changed, of course, things got bumped, things got moved. I am also going to try to integrate this schedule so that we have a way of linking documentation within it. We embed it within. And maybe if we decide, because I think there was some appetite for having this be a living document, which may be on the website at some point, so that the public knew what we were working on. I'm going to try to morph that over so they don't get the nuts and the bolts, right? That the committee needs to know to do their work. But certainly they can look at the timeline and the schedule. So if they have something that is important to them, they know which meeting or when what quarter of the year they really should be paying attention or reviewing. This document that I have in front of you is meant to be an aid to the committee and to the council to understand what the thought is or what is the mechanism in which we try to move ordinance work. And so you're getting certainly my thoughts, the committee's thoughts, and the council's thoughts within this document. So this is meant to be ours right now, but if the committee certainly wants it to be on the website as part of their initiative to get things out, then I can continue to work on getting that transitioned. The only thing I would say about that is, as you know, we are working in Google, looking to transition over to Microsoft Office, right? And so I would recommend that if we go in this direction, that we give ourselves a realistic timeline, that if I'm going to release it to go on the website, it really should be in the Microsoft platform. And because right now it's in Google, and of course you, Andrea, I think I may or may not have to add you. I'm not sure yet okay.
Been shared with us, right?
Yes, I believe it has. So I guess what I'm saying is, if we were going to put a stamp on what the goal is for getting this to the public, I'd say that we say by March, it should be up on the website, right? And if it's set up the way it is, then it's going to have the framework that Dan had requested. That if somebody looks at the schedule and they see alcoholic beverages was taken up on December 24, here is the link to see what the new language looks like. And if we were going to work on, let's say, hypothetically, we were going to work on the cemeteries ordinance, which we have spring of 26 anticipated, right? Then that same document would have all of the work, meaning the original ordinance and then the redlined copy and any preparatory notes, which explains what we're changing, that they could look at the schedule, they could click on the links, and there it is. And then the public is never in a position of coming back to the council and saying that they don't know what we're doing, or they're having a hard time finding things. Now, to circle back to another question that the committee had, there was some discussion around not knowing where to find ordinances that had been passed by the council, but not yet codified or not yet put in the code of ordinances. So in working with Amanda and with Cody and our general code company, we are front loading all of the past ordinance work at the front of the code book. So now on the website, if you go to the website, you pull up the code that is electronic. If you open that up, it immediately brings you to that front page. And that front page has the uncodified ordinance. And what the uncodified ordinance is it's ordinance that's gone through final review. It's been approved and accepted by the council, but it has not been embedded and it has not been codified against our other statutes or our other codes to be sure that it has consistency. It becomes part of the tabling of contents. So if you were to go to the table of contents, you would very quickly say, oh crap, they haven't updated this. Well, it's not updated because there is a process that it has to go through. And we only update table of contents once a year. And it is very, very expensive if we codify as we approve ordinance. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well, makes sense to me, I don't know.
they give us a bigger discount if they only have to do it once a year versus every time we make a change. Okay.
I like this front load like this. We're very active
Yes.
and it makes sense to have these out there.
Yes. Yep. So, I mean, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time, of course, getting into this and looking at this, but Andrea, you were coming on at a great time for us to think about the upcoming 2026 and for me to really review and be prepared to release, because at a minimum, you should have this, right? So it only makes sense that we update everything.
So the view what's changed, click that button and it shows recent changes on the right.
Yeah,
Are those the things that aren't yet codified or those codified that are in? It looks like. Oh, the land use, yeah, okay, that's good.
yeah. I felt like they did a pretty good job at explaining, or at least laying it out.
Yeah.
That it makes some sense.
It does.
Yeah, okay. So I think that is the unfinished business, Dan.
Yeah.
That we kind of had from the last meeting, so there has been progress. One other thing, Andrea, to let you know that you would have missed, and Dan, you are welcome to correct me if I assumed this incorrectly. It was the interest.
I was just thinking, looking up every now and then.
Yeah.
Which day is she talking?
Am I giving you the snake eye yet?
Yeah, well, I'm looking up.
So it was my understanding that going forward, the committee would like to have possibly a very brief, short memo or just a summary, like a overview summary of what changes committee was recommending or what changes were before the council for any ordinance going forward. Because if you take this in its original form, which you all got this morning, we're looking at traffic and vehicles, and then you take the red line copy and you try to parallel and do this, you can get lost very quickly. And I think when we first started doing our heavy lift of ordinance work, I was putting together these little internal memos, which would make it very user-friendly to know what was the committee's thoughts, why did this get changed? In this section, what was the main theme of that section that had to be changed per statute? And by doing this, it helped council be prepared a little more and be able to follow the flow of the documents. And so it was my understanding, we discussed that last meeting, and it was determined that we want to do that for all of them going forward.
That is absolutely my understanding, and
Yeah.
I will say that, one, this is staff led, and two, sometimes we are 6 weeks between when we have the detailed discussion and then when Rob, myself, and now you are before the council, presentation environment.
Yeah.
Talking about why the different changes are, it's not. Well, I think it's supposed to meet the definition of transparent, but not the spirit of transparency. To, okay, go back and watch the video from, the December 18th meeting when we talked about it for half an hour, and it's a very important.
Yes.
Reminder to those who on the committee, but also to present what we've discussed to the rest of the council department. So I definitely support it if it's not working.
Yeah, and I mean, to be quite honest, things happen. If there was an emergency and I couldn't remote in or I couldn't attend a meeting, not that I'm the spokesperson, so to speak, but it at least creates the framework of why the change is being made. So it only lends the transparent view that we did our homework. We know why we're making the change.
Yeah, we have a forever document that we can go back to. Why that one? I think it's.
Yeah.
And when we talk about, I'm not finding this document shared stuff.
Okay.
Does it make sense for us to organize a folder where where we have maybe have this at the top and then the work that goes into the archive, where we can archive these summaries and stuff like that, or does it have that?
I already have a folder
Yeah, you do.
that is organized by chapter by ordinance,
Yeah.
and it's laid out.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of me getting it shared to all of you. And then that way you'll even be able to see where I'm at with particular ordinance work. There again, right now, it's on my Microsoft Office side of things because I know that's where we're going. I can share it into Google, but if I share it into Google, we have to get it back out. So I'm not opposed to any of that.
Once the conversion's done and it's
Yeah.
that's for you.
Yeah.
So that I think it's easier to be able to go into a file, shared file, than to go back to my email. Stuff. So I think that's when.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So that's a little bit of housekeeping.
Good.
So that you're aware. Andrea, I am really looking to you to gauge if you have questions or there are things that you want to ask that maybe we don't cover today. Because you're kind of being thrown into the deep end of the pool a bit, but we'll get you caught up.
Good news is you're replacing Leo, so the bar's not that high. I try to say that as much as I can for Leo and all Leo's.
I think he's
Adore Leo.
I think he still had his life jacket on.
Yeah, adore Leo. So we miss a friend and a lover.
And if Leo's watching, because he misses this, he loved ordinance work. Then hi, Leo. So anyway, you see that we have two guests. One of our guests is our police chief, Dan Merrill. So when council started really talking about the traffic and vehicles and some of the concerns with streets and parking and all of the areas that they were seeing some activity bubble up from residents, we were given the direction that we needed to pause the ordinance work we were doing and shift focus to this. That happened, I'd say, Dan, wouldn't you agree? It was like in October that you and I had this land on our desk and we started meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it all.
yeah, it was fall. So what you have in front of you is you have chapter 34 in its original framework, right? So it's in its entirety of currently what is on the docket as being our ordinance. The last time that traffic and vehicles was evaluated and any significant change was made was December of 22, which really is not that long ago, but as we know, sometimes when they went in and made change, the flavor or the intent at that time was only change the one thing that needs fixing. We'll go back and fix the entire ordinance at another time. And so what has happened as I review the ordinances is I see that we have some sections of ordinance that are relevant, right? And they're what we're doing for practice. But then the ordinance in its entirety is so outdated that I don't know how we would really support a change that got made. So my philosophy or my intent has always been when I've done ordinance work for other organizations is if we're going to do it, let's do it front to back and let's do it the right way, right? Because if we're opening it up, then that's your opportunity to make sure that your work matches your practice. So I started, when I got this on my desk, the first thing I started doing was pulling traffic and vehicles policies or ordinances from anywhere in the state that had a logistic or an infrastructure and a population and possibly even a college like ours, and identifying where there was issues of inconsistency, where there was issues of lack, and where there were issues that we definitely had something written that was not being practiced. That's when I bring my senior manager in and I say, let's have a talk, let's brainstorm. I want to hear what your needs are and how can we meet in the middle. So Dan and I started doing that work. And Dan and I quickly identified that there was a lot of outdated stuff within the ordinance. There was things that really should and need to be needed. of placement. And then we also realized that we had the same issue happening in chapter 34 that happened in solid waste. And Dan, you remember this issue. We didn't even know who was in charge of solid waste. Well, we knew that it said the ordinance was the town manager. But is the town manager going to be going to the landfill on a day-by-day basis to make sure that the landfill is running properly? He has a public works director, but nowhere in solid waste could we find a reference to a public works director. So then we're not only looking at logistics, practice, but we're looking at chain of command and hierarchy of how this ordinance or policy gets administered.
What I love about our process is that with you leading it, bringing the department heads to you, we're gonna have consistency across all the different chapters. Because
Yes.
even the, capitalizing police chief and town manager changes, I it'll be made well.
Yeah.
So it'll be clear, the ordinance will be
Yes,
a document that's consistent, even though it has you lean on the subject matter experts within each of the departments to help you come up with policy issues.
Yeah.
Logistics, you'll have that same flavor.
Yes.
I like that a lot.
exactly. And so when Amanda just come and, got me downstairs, I was literally sitting with our public works director and saying, oh, by the way, you are now going to be included in yet another policy ordinance.
So since we're on traffic.
Yep.
just to pause that detour, what were the peer communities that you found that were like, that Orono like in terms of?
So I reviewed Waterville, I reviewed Bangor, I reviewed Camden. I looked at a coastal, somewhat rural, southern Maine. I can't remember if it was Biddeford or
Yeah.
Buxton.
Yeah.
And I started there was a community you had suggested. Do you remember which community it was?
Yes.
Oh, was it a Gunquit?
It might have been a
Was it
Gunquit.
Gunquit? Because I know Gunquit had a big tourist population, I know they got their
Yeah.
parking pretty low down.
We
So it
did
might have
look,
been a Gunquit.
That would make
Yeah.
sense to me.
They're a small community, but massive influx.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of like that similar
yeah,
issues that we have with parking, it might have been that one.
yeah, and I did look at Bar Harbor from the perspective of restricted parking and how that infrastructure works
Yeah.
around, because as you know, they installed the parking meters and such. So I was looking at it, not because, I was looking at it more as, I try to think 15 years out. When I was trained in community infrastructure, I was trained that you always examine a 15-year period out, and where do you want to be at the end of 15 years?
Mhm.
So when you set up your ordinance work, you got to think linear timeline of now, but also, is this still going to support you in 15 years? Because if you think about it 15 years out, where do you want to go? You need to have the framework to be able to try to get there. So when Dan and I had that conversation, that's when the real magic started happening. And Dan and I came up with some creative ideas on how we can solve our parking issue or our lack of knowledge of where you can park and where you can't park. Because when you put your police chief and your town clerk together in the same room, and we don't even know how to figure out where you can park and where you can't, then how in the heck are you going to expect a college kid or a common resident or a tourist to Orono to figure out where they can park and can't?
Perfect example, Park Street, west side from a point 170 feet easterly of the intersection of Park and College Ave, southerly to the intersection of Park Street and College Ave. Somebody go point that on a map
Yeah,
and tell me where
Yeah.
170 feet from that is where you cannot park on Park Street.
yeah.
I could not tell you what's going on.
Right,
And we have
Put
no.
the big paper right here, the challenge of parking. Yeah, we got.
It's very important. there are signs. Thing that we have done the best, I think, is that we work with Public Works to put up adequate signage.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I would hope that we're not enforcing parking in this section. I don't believe that we're enforcing parking in this section where it's not readily signed.
Yeah,
We have a lot of really good signage in town, I'm just saying, like Shelley's saying.
Yeah.
To the point of. These things are a little too maybe down in the weeds.
Yeah.
And if we're talking tape measures and stuff, you know, Shelley and I made a comment about, it's like talking about telephone poles and trees that exist, like.
Yeah.
You're not saying the ordinance is up to exist for
Yeah.
20
Right.
years.
that's fine.
exactly. And in all honesty, the council has their authority. They set the policy, but they work within the framework of the charter and the ordinance structure.
Right.
And so I think that in the past, communities would look to the ordinance as being its policy or its framework. And what they've done is they basically tied hands a little bit so that when there are pertinent issues or things that come up, bubble to the surface that the council has to deliberate on and get back to residents or neighborhoods with concerns about.
Mhm.
They are basically not able to do the work that they would do because it's gotta go through an ordinance change before they can even do it, because we are so far into the weeds. So in that spirit, Dan and I talked about, well, what should be struck completely? And what should be moved more into an SOP or moved more into a standard policy that you take up on an annual basis, like the schedule of fees or like the GA ordinance, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and so that is the flavor of which Dan and I had our conversation and our brainstorming. And so we've come up with some creative ideas of what we can do, and what you see here is the beginning of some of that creative work that we think we can work on and get implemented. And we're ready to talk about it, but at this point, I want Dan, if Dan, you're ready, I'm throwing you under the bus and I'm gonna back up and run you over again.
You can throw one in the bus, you can't pass the bus.
I
The
know,
lights are flashing.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you talk to what some of your bigger issues were, the things that you think this change is gonna help us with.
Yeah, I think at a high level, one thing that Shelley mentioned, but it's just worth calling out. This spreadsheet that Shelley created that said this ordinance was gone for in 2022, it only touched one section. 3494 special night parking was the only section of the ordinance that was touched. So to say that this ordinance, to go back to what Shelley was saying, to say this ordinance has gone through with a fine tooth comb is not exactly a fair representation. If you look at all the footnotes as Shelley was going through it, looks like it's going on 14 years. Looks like the last time this was gone through, it looks to me like it's 2011, from what I can tell from most of the other cliff notes. So some of the things that really stood out to me that have evolved, like Shelley was talking about, is there's sections in here on taxis and ride sharing. There's nothing in here that talks about there's nothing that talks about, you know, Ubers or Lyfts or ride shares. We would like to update the terminology around taxis to be more global, in that it's called, I would say it's called ride sharing now, right?
Mhm.
So that could encompass taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, any type of transportation where you would pay a fee, I would say. Some places in here where, when Shelley and I were talking, I think the spirit of some of the places where it's calling out Public Works and police is. I see the places in the ordinance. What my role is enforcement, and Public Works is purview in this parking ordinance is infrastructure and signage, right? So the Public Works Department will work on a plan to create the infrastructure and the signage consistent with this ordinance that we then can enforce as a police department. So that's kind of how I see this ordinance working, and just how we day-to-day operate as a town. So when you see stuff in here that's now talking about police chief, town manager and public works director, we were trying to draw those two different overlapping duties, I guess. So there's a lot of that in there. You'll see a lot of town manager, public works, police chief.
While,
Stopping, standing and all that in 3486. That's just a big update, it looks like. What do you
and
say, Shelley?
while you're collecting your thoughts on the last parts that we looked at, I will state that Dan is correct. In 2022, the council and the senior team spent considerable time working on the winter night parking or the special night parking section, and that actually did move forward and get approved. But we are what, 4 years out, 3 years out from 2022? And Dan came to me and said, Shelley, it's not really working. I mean, even our practice is not necessarily aligning, and there are issues or concerns even around how it is set up with the dates, the times, and the communication to the public. And we are potentially being challenged over and over again on language that doesn't support the fact that we're enforcing it. So when the public comes forward and they challenge our process, and the framework of the ordinance does not lend itself to what we've enforced, then we have an issue, right? Dan, would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think, and this is something that I know that we talked about it when we reworked this ordinance. I think this is something that could still use a little more fine tuning to what Shelley is bringing.
Yeah.
And it's something that I would really, I'm open to other people's thoughts on, and it's not something we necessarily have to vet out right now, but just put it in the back of your mind is that the winter parking ban seems to be something that is hard to really nail down in an ordinance, because we're talking about weather and weather events. And as we all know, no 2 years are the same. So to create an ordinance that universally covers weather events that change every single year, the timing of them, it's been a particularly cold and snowy and wet start to this year, right?
Mhm.
But I remember around this timeline, 21, 22, we were having warm falls and winters. We were having days like we're gonna have tomorrow where it's gonna be 60 degrees, right? And we're like, why do we have a winter parking ban in effect when it's 60 degrees in the middle of December? And we're like, well, because that's what the ordinance says. So it kind of came under some scrutiny and change at that time. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just think we're trying to create an ordinance that is easily applicable and is consistent and not moving back and forth. Because I know we've talked about this before. When the goalposts move, it creates confusion.
Yeah.
Right.
And I feel like the goalpost has got some curves on it, if I'm being honest.
And that's why I think that memo is important, that kind of have that flavor as to why that change is, and then.
Yep.
We'll need to rely on you, and when we talk about it with council and community, to kind of provide that. As the people in charge of, as the implementers of policy, that we can rely on you to tell us those kind of things, those are important. Here.
Sure. And just in case people want to have a frame of reference, if you were to go to page 9 of the document.
The red line document?
Yep, the red lined document.
Yeah.
You are going to see that there has been significant wordsmithing done in order to address the concerns that Dan had. Dan and I met, I'd say, Dan, we gave this a solid 30 to 40 minutes to be sure that we could wordsmith what he was trying to communicate so that in layman terms, it made sense to anybody who would look at this if this was to pass. So.
I think outside of that, it's just, you'll see in the red line version, it's just a lot of clerical cleanup stuff.
It
Shelley's
is.
worked on. I think the two biggest sections that you'll see massive changes in is, like I said, 3490, where it's talking about rideshare, rideshare designation of parking and standing, stuff like that.
Yeah.
We just talked about 3494. And. The big one is the one after that, 3495, and that's where it just lists out all the streets.
Yes.
With footages and.
Right,
Green theorems.
and
We're
so,
trying to clean that up.
right,
How will you do that? Will it be a list that you'll approve annually?
yeah, so
That's what we talked about.
do you want to hear our creative brainstorm?
You can do that app thing, where people can figure out whether they can park there or not.
It's mentioned.
Yep, and we,
So
so
you'll like this one.
Andrea, what you're missing is at the last meeting. We talked around the table about how difficult it is for someone who's never been to Orono or a new college student who's learning to drive or what have you, away from home. How do they figure out where they can and can't park? And so what kind of bubbled up was that we have all this technology. Most everybody has a cell phone. We're already using GIS mapping where you can pin certain things. We're already using technology to track what trash cans are being delivered when or picked up or how or who needs, right? We're using all of that. What if we expanded that net with yet another layer that the roads and the streets were treated much like we treat those other services? And we work with Megan Hess and the GIS mapping coordinates to actually set up that we could sign the entire town with either a QR code or some type of a emblem that a person could literally either pin their location using our mapping technology, or they could walk up to the sign and scan the QR code, and it would immediately tell them, yes, you can park there. No, you can't park there. If you choose to park here, this is what it will cost you. Blah, 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 blah. And we build what that looks like. And so at that point, we no longer have to pull this out every time we want to know, right? Because now we're using that technology to our advantage. But on the back side, we completely strike the whole section of what streets and roads. We turn it into an SOP or an annual renewal process that happens in August or September. I mean, you might even decide you want to couple it with schedule of fees, and it happens at that same time that the council's looking at their annual calendar and their repetition review process. And at that time, your town manager, public works director, and your police chief has already met, and they're bringing to you the recommended road and street closure, recommended road and street parking list. And you on an annual basis are determining that, yes, we agree with this list. Yes, this is the list. And then once you've taken that, you've approved that in your meeting, that comes back to us. Gets posted on our website, gets sent out to social media, and our whole system gets updated. So it's instantaneous that now everybody has the same information and they can access it with their phones. So when we talked about that, and I sat down with Dan and we started getting kind of creative and really thinking about this in the real time, can we make this happen? We looped in Megan Hess. And Megan Hess was all excited. She gets that twinkle in her eye and she's like, I can do this. I can do this. We can partner. You're going to have to buy me signs. I mean, we're going to have an order of like, X amount of signs. But for this kind of a project, you need that many signs anyway. And my public works team can run with this, but I need the green light. So that's where we're at, Dan. That's the exciting news. But it all is happening because we know we need to.
We can bring that forward to the staff and bring that forward to us as part of the budget, or as a separate order.
So
talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, I briefed Clint and Clint is like, yeah, see what we can put together, what it looks like when we wanna get in front of council with this. So he's aware of this kind of brainstorm we got cooking up. But I think part of that is we have to do the two in tandem. Because my goal for this, Dan, you tell me if this is a workable timeline. My goal for this is that we would have this ready for council, right? March, maybe April.
The ordinance.
Yep.
Yeah.
For a decision. And the reason I'm saying that, Dan, is because I wanna be respectful of everybody's time, number one. Number two, I'm thinking about this logistically from the integration of Google to Microsoft Office. And if we're going to be launching potential platforms, we need to be able to know that I don't wanna do this twice.
Yeah.
I mean, to be blunt, we don't have that kind of time.
And can you think about it in terms of like, I think that makes a ton of sense to me. We are being mindful of the budget, heavy
Yeah.
lift, I think it's February, March, and April, we're kind of
Yeah.
trying to be, people. I committed to kind of dialing the damnness down from 10
Yeah.
to 11 to maybe 7 or 6.
50%. Are you committing to that?
Talk about it, I thought we did not get paid, so it's an election year.
Figured out where he's plugged in, that you pull the cord back every so often.
But I think that, that's her job, actually, to unplug me and pull me back. She's got 6 people, trying to do it. But I think that, I think about it in terms of communicating with, the back to school communication we did over
Yeah.
the summer and, the implementation of, so look, it sounds like that would sequence well with that
Yeah.
work. Because, you gotta be thinking in middle of
Right.
spring about how we're gonna welcome everybody back to town in
Mhm.
August.
Mhm.
So I like that a lot, and we'll have the Orono stops, we'll have the good neighbor stop.
Yeah.
And Orono engage, and I think that is kind of whatever the
Mhm.
team decides to kind of bring it
Right,
all together as, I think that's.
right.
I'm excited about it.
And so, as I already stated, I just brought Earl to the conversation this morning. Of course, Megan's been part of the conversation, but Earl has not. And Dan and I do have to sit back down and go over this again because he has a lot around enforcement that he is also trying to check against Maine statute, because wherever Maine statute is very loud, we are looking to remove it out of ordinance and refer people back to Maine statute.
Yeah.
And that is going to be just a good housekeeping measure, and we've done that with other ordinances that we've already approved.
Sure.
Because why do we wanna set ourselves up to be in conflict of Maine statute, right? Because that gets us into hot water. So when I look at this, like from today forward, what I see happening is we'll meet next month. In that time frame, I will pull in the public works folks. Dan and I will finish our work. Public Works should be able to give me a timeline of what it looks like if we were to head in that signage project. We would probably look to maybe have it be the first review of this.
Yeah.
Next month. I've given it to you so you can see the work thus far. And then once that,
This is 80% of what you're gonna do, there'll be a lot more changes to come.
yeah, I'd say 80%'s fair, wouldn't you, Dan?
Yeah, that's a lot of changes.
Yeah, already.
Yeah.
I also do wanna say that if we look at our schedule, we do have a couple ordinances that kind of overlap with this. So part of what I need to do behind the scenes is I need to look at those other ordinances to see if these changes impact those. So you may see that you have a couple of things that I bring up next month that we're gonna have to take a look at. And one that I would bring immediately to your attention is chapter number 40. Chapter number 40 is vehicles for hire. That was 1981 that was implemented. And I can tell you it's never been utilized. It's never been. I mean, it's about how you manage and you regulate and you license your taxi cabs. We've never done that here.
Yeah.
And so I think Dan and I are of the opinion, as was Josh, Ewing and I, that ordinance should just be completely repealed and struck. Because until the town of Orono has an appetite that it is going to play motor vehicle division and start licensing its courier services, its Ubers, and its taxi cabs, why do we have it in our ordinance manual? And I don't think, Dan, you want to do that.
I know others have done it, looking across the table at EJ, and I think that it is something that is it's a staff capacity.
Yeah, and EJ, you are welcome to weigh in if you have a thought on this that we're talking about.
Ride shares and Ubers, I think, are much tougher than taxis.
Yeah.
I know that when I talked to other surrounding municipalities and they were doing it, like police chiefs. Taxi companies as a sole provider are easier to license because you just say. X taxi company needs to have a license and a permit with the towns that I know you're operating. I'm not knowing who your drivers are, you just need to have a representative come to us. And make sure that you're all licensed and have proper insurances and stuff like that. With ride share companies as they are now, with Ubers and the Lyfts of the world. Practically don't have an answer for you as to how we would go with that. It's. Yeah. You're dealing with a big corporation, taxis. In the 80s and 90s were local companies,
Yeah.
Mhm.
regional resources.
Yeah. Certainly it makes sense that if we're not, and there's not an urgent problem to solve. I'd rather, it makes sense to me that I just as soon repeal as many as we write. If that's the right way to do it. And I do think as we talk about the March and April, before I lose the thought. I assume we'll talk about support MD and I think important the council that the businesses in Orono that really are depending on access to the delivery services.
Yeah.
And it's Taco Rita, I can't tell you how many bags I see walk out to one.
Oh.
Yeah. And they need quick access to make that work. Want all Orono businesses to have that. So anyway, that's kind of like something to think about that too.
Something Shelley and I talked about, and I think that that's one of the things that Shelley was talking about with that chapter 40 taxi ordinance. It's talked about taxis and ride sharing is talked about in this chapter 34, traffic and vehicles.
Yeah.
So we've had a conversation about that exact same thing. Door dashing, right? If a door dasher is delivering food to your house and it's in a no parking section, are you in violation of the ordinance or are you exempt because you're a ride share?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean if I drive by and see you there still an hour later and your car's covered in snow, I don't believe you're ride sharing anymore, right? That's that discretion and understanding of what is actual ride share use, not.
I also think we need to think about EJ, I'm glad you're here for this, try to hear just a period, but what is the right time and people should be, there are people who rent apartments on Mill Street and that part of town. And the residents, those parking spaces are meant during the day, need to be available, people are running and grab a bagel. Or run and grab a Chicago dog in 90 minutes or 2 hours, whatever the right time frame is.
Right.
They're not meant for people. We gotta make sure those businesses have those spaces to turn over to people.
I think something that EJ and I probably should talk about, and I know it's can be a delicate topic to talk about in town is. Brought this up, paid for parking is something that if the town wants to do something that is consistent and relevant. That is a mechanism to generate revenue, but it is a way. To try and enforce stuff, the community that one of my friends is the police chief in a Gunwood. And in that tourist community, they raised $5 million in parking revenue alone this fiscal year, $5 million. Because people come in, go to the beach, they might buy 3 hours, stay for 2, they leave, somebody else comes in, pays $30 over that overlapping, then you get $60 for that overlapping minute. They stay and it just compounds. And I'm not saying that that's the right answer, I'm just saying that it's a conversation worth having. If we want to talk about revenue and infrastructure.
I think it's,
And those systems take care of it, so we don't need. I mean, they have parking attendants that are down there too.
Mhm.
But, you know, we'd have to think about what that means, but there is
Yeah,
technological infrastructure that can cover you for this.
and Booth Bay Harbor has also done the same thing, and they actually have the kiosks set up around town. Yeah, yeah. Online.
yeah, I think I don't know, we're just talking here and.
Yeah.
I think I'm more interested in behavior modification than I am revenue raising. I don't wanna make it more expensive to go to both the.
Yeah.
Bubble tea or, you know what I mean?
That's the bigger question.
Yeah, I don't wanna make it more expensive for those businesses to serve their customers. If it's free, make it, free for 30 minutes and then, bang, the starts kicking in and start hammering you. So you know what I mean?
Right.
Hammers is tough, not the right word, but I mean, if you wanna have the convenience of parking in that space for 3 hours, maybe there's a revenue component for that, but it's for behavior. You want
Yeah.
people in those key spaces. We got we need more bike racks, that's another conversation, but the family dog bike rack outside Taqueria, and you have
Mhm.
like the library or
Yeah,
but I think I'm more interested in behavior. I'm definitely interested in pursuing it and for the infrastructure.
right.
And I don't know if there's anything you can do with. Such political pandering. I don't know if there's something you could do with Orono residents when they register their car, they get a sticker, something that
Mhm.
absolves them from metering.
Yeah,
So I go down and register, you register your Jeep, you get a little, I'm an Orono resident sticker, and then you like. Free parking forever in Orono anywhere, whereas visitors, so I don't know, that seems, I don't know if that's legal, I don't know if that's, sounds like that's a.
yeah,
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 but. I do think if we look at, I think we do need to look at behavior. And those kiosk systems could be a very, just like. Speed tickets, they are the way to change behaviors, and once people get the word that, alright, I parked for 32 minutes. I got charged, or maybe you have to. Maybe you have to scan to park in any of those kind of, just spitball, and maybe you have to, like in Portland,
Mhm.
you can't park anywhere in Portland without using kiosks.
Right,
And. But if you give everybody the first 30 minutes free, and then you put your card in, so okay, if it takes me 35 minutes to drink my bubbly tea. Or the green teas or the.
Yes. Yep.
Delicious. And sugar free, I'm told, for quite lots. But. You pay 31 minutes, just cost me $2, that minute just cost me $2, and from here at 60 minutes, it's gonna cost me $4.
mhm.
So something like that would be, I think it has to be a conversation with the business owners. It has to be there, something they have buy-in for, but I don't know.
Yeah, we don't,
Something that they're not gonna.
I don't want that conversation to weigh this ordinance down, because I don't think
Right.
that that's a separate conversation. Yes.
Okay.
But to say. I know it has come up in the past.
Okay.
And I know that I've talked to other communities and when I've gone to meetings and we're talking about things, like I said, I talked to him this fall and it was. Within a month ago, they were at that number already, and it blew my mind that a community could raise that much money and just parking.
yeah,
Awestruck.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying again, infrastructure is not cheap. You have to spend money to generate revenue, and it's not meant to be a penalty, it's just. A source for a town to create fun, right?
I think
It's
it's-
job more than it is mine, I just know that it's.
Well, I think
today.
the behavior piece comes into play, a lot of downtowns you'll have your metered parking, but you also have. Perhaps within a 2-minute walk or 3-minute walk, free parking
Mhm.
somewhere else that you want people to go to.
Mhm.
Because then they're not tying up a space,
right,
you know you're gonna be there all day, whether, I don't know how employees or where employees park that work in these businesses. Or I'm gonna go to Tuckerito, I'm just gonna do my homework for 4 or 5 hours. You've tied up that space for 4 or 5 hours.
yeah,
Charge them, if they're willing to pay for 4 or 5 hours, the meter will do that. But if you're just looking to come to downtown to go bounce around to various places, here's the free parking here. And we clearly identify it, people walk.
Yeah.
It sort of ties in with some of the other safer streets and
Yeah.
less congestion. And so there's a.
Dan's point about, let's be careful that this is where you're gonna dial me back, right? Gotta be careful. This ordinance review is to make the ordinance work.
Yeah.
And then if we start dipping our toe into a different policy, that's a different conversation. We gotta go back to the council and ask the council to assign either community development or this committee.
Yeah.
As long as it's one of the committees I'm on, right? Yeah, that's, but, keep it out of finance, it's things good for everything. But, that's kind of, that's a good reminder to answer that.
Yeah.
But a global topic, and that has come up before and just something, if somebody had a temperature in time.
But I would encourage you to talk to people about what's the right approach. Yeah. But I definitely I definitely think there's some element of this that has to be. Need space for those
You do.
cars that come in and out, short deliveries, stuff like that, be mindful of that, so we don't,
So,
sorry.
no, that's fine. So in the spirit of time, because we try to keep it to an hour, we pretty much given you the overarching view of where our work is on this and where we're hoping to go. And so the goal of today was to say, does this sound reasonable? Do you want us to continue? Is it going in a direction that you have an appetite that it go? Because if it isn't, then we can, pivot and we can go in a different direction. But I thought it was important where we've done a lot of work on this thus far to at least make you aware and check in. So that's what today was your preliminary check-in.
Andrea, what do you think?
No, I think especially like the big. Because of technology part of so. Right away, no, can I park here or can,
Yeah,
and then eventually that may even phase into the permanent parking.
yep,
Yeah, and I've used it, Sean and I talked,
oh, yeah,
Dan mentioned it, go to any bigger cities or municipalities, of course, the places that have infrastructure like this.
mhm,
So if we want to be forward thinking, like Orono is good at being, right? That would be something to look at.
So you could start warming up like they're doing at Hannaford, right, with the self-checkout kiosk.
Right.
Warm people up with the QR code about where you can and cannot park. And maybe a year or two later, we're getting that into the
Yeah.
parking where it makes sense to have that
mhm,
behavior modification.
mhm.
So
I like to the reviewing the streets, really. Because they're. Streets.
Needs change in the
Needs
town
change,
very
yes.
often, especially with a lot of these new projects that are coming. I think the parking enforcement and parking has been something I know that even something the previous public works director and the previous police chief before me, I heard them, it was on their desk.
Mhm.
I mean, it's been something that has come and gone and never really got a ton of traction and attention that's ever clearly changed the ordinance. It's the same since 2011.
Yeah.
So,
anything else before I kind of wrap? So for deliverables. One, I'm supportive, so I think you're heading absolutely in the right direction. The next January, just to repeat it at the end of the meeting, to fine. Easy for Rob, we're gonna have, next January, you'll have a more complete version of the ordinance, we've got a couple works through, we'll go from 80% to maybe 99 or 90, whatever the right number on it, but. We'll look at March, April for council. I think you should probably anticipate. More public interest in this than maybe some of the, the solid waste. So I think, people care a lot about stuff that's right in front of the street.
Yep.
So I think we should probably participate, and I think we should probably try and. Create more awareness about what's going on. But I think that's, I don't have anything, if you could send, if you make sure you share this, if you haven't shared this with us again.
Yes, yep.
And then I do think we should, make a point of maybe at some point have a version of this, if it's. It could be posted to the ordinance review committee agenda, we have the agenda, the committee stuff at the top of every council meeting agenda. It would make a lot of sense to me to have this link to every single agenda, just so people can follow it, other councils ask.
Yep.
What's the schedule for that?
And one thing just for point of housekeeping, so that you don't leave the meeting, this would be more towards Dan, because you weren't in the last meeting, but just to make sure I close the circle. Work is still continuing on the cemetery ordinance.
Okay. Cemetery work continuing. I thought maybe it died, but.
Oh, no, well,
That was a
so,
seven joke, that was a.
Yeah.
The older you get, the better they get, they are.
just like,
Yeah.
people are dying to get in there.
Yeah, that would have been more direct.
Yes,
Those progressive people. Love those people.
I
Telling your
know.
Parents, oh my god.
yeah,
Okay, and then. Okay, that's
Should
great.
somebody, if we're gonna talk about this ordinance in January,
Mhm.
I'm gonna not, I don't plan on being a standing committee member here.
Yeah,
But if we're talking about parking and stuff, I'll dip in, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just make sure I get on the invites when it's relevant.
sure.
Yeah.
I probably
Not that I
will,
don't enjoy this a ton. I just
Yeah.
don't need to be
Thank-
talking
yeah,
about cemeteries.
yeah.
right,
yeah, we put a lot on your plate. Listen to my dad jokes, not one of your,
Oh,
I know you enjoy it,
Yeah.
or you listen to that too.
No, we have a stake in it, so. I'm
Yeah.
more than happy to stay on this committee we're talking about.
and I, in all likeliness, will be inviting the public works crew too. Meaning that would either be Megan or it would be Earl, either or. If they have input they want to share,
Negative, okay. I like when Megan gets fired up, stuff, so.
Yeah.
I like that energy. Good work, anything else for Andrew? Yeah. Thank you, that'll, I guess that'll adjourn us.
Yeah.
Happy holidays and happy new year to people. It's our last council event, I think, the 25 year.
Yeah.
I think so, is there any meetings?
yeah. Not aware,
Just turn this off.
Plug.
I didn't even see that when I went out and hit the button on the screen.